Tonight, A&E presents the premiere of a new weekly series that reconstructs contemporary events through the eyes of the people who were there. We call it Minute by Minute. The first episode, planned and produced over the past year, is about the bombing of the World Trade Center on February 26, 1993. That attack foreshadowed the horrific events of September 11th. This program tells the story of the triumph of the human spirit, giving us hope when all appears to be lost. How everyday men and women become our heroes when faced with overwhelming odds. The people who participated in this episode survived the recent attack, but so many others have perished. We dedicate this program to the men, women, and children who lost their lives in the terrorist attacks on February 26, 1993, and September 11, 2001. Here now is Minute by Minute.
Confused, horrific screams. The world was coming to an end.
We lost 15 seconds.
It'll never leave my mind.
Tonight on Minute by Minute, the 1993 World Trade Center bombing. New York City, rush hour. Millions of people trudge through snow and freezing winds. Thousands come here to the World Trade Center in Lower Manhattan. It is a city in itself. Two of the world's tallest buildings, with 2 train stations, a hotel, mall, and more than 230 elevators, shuttling a daily population of nearly 200,000 people. One of those thousands is Carl Sellinger, a manager with the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey for 24 years. This morning, he's at his desk in Tower 1.
I work on the 65th floor, had a beautiful view out towards the Statue of Liberty, so it was like home.
7 floors above, the Port Authority's chief engineer, Gene Fasulo, is in his office on the 72nd floor.
My role was basically to run the engineering function at the Port Authority. It was really a very busy day.
Port Authority attorney Kathleen Collins enters her office on the 66th floor. 9 a.m. Thousands of other commuters stream out of the center's bustling train stations and into their offices. The Trade Center now teems with workers and visitors equaling the population of the entire city of Laredo, Texas. 10:10 a.m. A class of kindergartners makes its way through the huge glass revolving doors of Tower 2. They've come from Brooklyn on a field trip with their teacher, Rosemarie Russo.
I had 14 children that day. We're going to observation deck upstairs to get a bird's eye view of New York.
56 miles away, across the Hudson River, stock trader Tim Lang starts up his Toyota 4Runner for the trip to his office in New York City. It was a trip he did not want to make.
My partner called me that morning and asked me to come in that day. But I didn't see the point, and he eventually came around to convince me to come in.
11:15 a.m. 3 other men are also heading toward the World Trade Center. Iyad Ismail and Ramzi Youssef are driving a 10-foot yellow Ryder van. Following them is a car driven by Mohammed Salame. The FBI has a file on Salame. He is a known associate of reputed Islamic terrorists. Salame had leased the van from a Ryder rental agency in Jersey City 3 days earlier and reported it stolen just yesterday. It now carries a 1,500-pound bomb made of urea nitrate and hydrogen. 11:55 a.m. The yellow Ryder van pulls into level B2 of the World Trade Center garage. Iyad Ismail steers it to an illegal parking space. Mohammed Salame follows behind. Rosemarie Russo starts rounding up her 5-year-old sightseers on the Trade Center observation deck. Tim Lang pulls into the center's garage, 4 blocks from his office. In the Ryder van, Ramzi Youssef readies a fuse attached to the 1,500-pound bomb. On the 65th floor, manager Carl Sellinger leaves to get some lunch before his next appointment.
Well, the Port Authority has a cafeteria on the 43rd floor. I figured that, well, let me go get some salad to bring back to my desk because I really wanted to prepare for this meeting.
Gene Fasulo and two coworkers decide to go downstairs.
So we were actually on our way to lunch, and we were going to catch up on the events of the last week or so.
On the B2 level, Ramzi Youssef lights a fuse on the bomb. The fuse is encased in rubber, which suppresses smoke and allows for a 10 to 20 minute burn time. 150 feet away, the center's supervising engineer, Alan Reese, heads down the hallway to his office.
I was going downstairs to the office to see some friends and just talk about what we're going to do this weekend and how things were going.
2 floors below, on B4, engineer Fred Furby finishes a job and tells his coworker, Richie Walsh, to go upstairs to turn in their worksheets.
I was telling him to go take the paperwork, turn it in, so they don't come down and bother us, you know? And I just was so insistent on it, so he wouldn't turn it in.
12:05 p.m. Youssef and Ismail jump into Salome's car and speed out of the garage. 12:10 p.m. The fuse on the bomb has been burning for 6 minutes. Off-duty Port Authority detective Thomas McHale reads a newspaper on the Trade Center's concourse level as he waits for a train to New Jersey. McHale happens to be in the building for a doctor's appointment following a work-related injury.
The morning I was actually off duty. I injured my ankle in a line-of-duty injury in the subway.
Stock trader Tim Lang has found a parking spot. It's on the same level as the Ryder van, where the fuse has now been burning for 11 minutes. It's 12:17 p.m.
I'd gotten into the elevator and pressed 65.
I'm approached by an individual who asks for directions to the Newark train.
We're waiting now for the elevator to come for us.
I was standing within the door frame and had just opened the door to my office.
We entered an elevator on the 72nd floor.
I was cutting insulation, you know, putting it on the cart.
I was in my office, and my friend was coming up, and we were going to have pizza.
I got out of the car, opened the backseat door, reached for my things, had my car keys in my hand.
The rental van detonates with a force equivalent to 800 pounds of TNT, tearing through 11-inch concrete floors in the bowels of America's famous landmark.
I was physically lifted up into the air and thrown back with terrific force.
All of a sudden, just boom, something hit me, and it's like, it took my breath away. It blew me across the room.
The exterior walls of the garage came caving into the path concourse level.
On the street, car windshields as far as 300 feet away are blown apart as the wave of the blast shoots up through the buildings.
The elevator just came to emergency stop. It jiggled as it stopped quickly.
And then all of a sudden it stopped. It like shuddered and then stopped.
We were waiting to go down. The lights started flickering and the alarms started going off.
The wind is knocked out of you, but expand that to be every part of your body just being squeezed.
The smoke went up the elevator shaft and up some of the stair towers. Very shortly, it became very difficult to breathe.
I could just remember all the gray smoke just filling the whole entire area.
I put my hand in front of my face to try to see if I could see my hand, and I couldn't see anything. So my first thought was that I was blind.
Chaos and confusion confront rescuers as they try to reach Lang and thousands of others. At 12:18 in the afternoon, a 1,500-pound bomb is detonated in the underground parking garage of the World Trade Center. 12:20 p.m. New York Police Department bomb squad detective Stephen Dodge is about to go out for a quick lunch.
The phone call came in from the United States Secret Service telling us that there was a large explosion at the World Trade Center.
6 blocks from the Trade Center, while monitoring the police radio. Neil Herman, the supervisor of the FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force, hears about the explosion.
At first, it was believed to be some kind of a electrical or transformer explosion.
12:26 p.m. It's a citywide alert. Within minutes, 750 firefighters and hundreds of law enforcement and emergency personnel, including Dodge, converge on the Twin Towers.
There was mass confusion. People were running out of the building, ambulances were pulling up, fire trucks were pulling up.
Police set up a command center on the street outside Tower 1.
Smoke was emitting from every single floor.
Blocks away, the FBI's Neil Herman realizes this is no ordinary explosion. He and 8 other agents rush to the scene. 12:30 p.m. Lieutenant John Fox's squad from Brooklyn arrives.
When we pulled up, there was smoke coming out of these garage doors, which were they were like a little blown up. I still didn't know that there had been an explosion.
Inside, chaos. In the garage, at ground zero of the blast, Tim Lang at first believes he's gone blind.
After a short period of time, I saw a faint light, and it turned out to be the interior lights of my car. The doors were open. So I just felt an immediate sense of great relief. I basically was whole, and I wasn't blinded.
At the elevator bank, a floor below the roof deck of Tower 2, kindergarten teacher Rosemarie Russo has one purpose.
All I knew was to get these children, myself and the parents, to a safer place.
She and her 5-year-olds hustle upstairs from the elevator bank to wait outside in the 29-degree cold and falling snow, 110 floors above ground. In a hallway on the 66th floor, attorney Kathleen Collins can only wait in her wheelchair with a few co-workers.
The usual procedures, you wait for the trained personnel to come for a person who has a disability.
In an elevator on the 58th floor, engineer Gene Fasulo is trapped with 9 others.
We decided to take action. We first took the ceiling down from the elevator, hoping to get out the top, and there was no way of getting out the top. We actually ripped the walls off the elevator with our bare hands, and there was nothing but a steel box at that point.
Down on the concourse level, off-duty Port Authority detective Thomas McHale had just finished giving someone directions. Moments later, he sees the man struck by falling concrete.
I can't find the words to describe it. It was just like, oh my God, you know, I can't believe this is happening.
Despite his sprained ankle, McHale assists the man. 4 levels below, building engineer Fred Furby regains consciousness on level B4.
When I came to, there was debris all on me. I got my flashlight and I looked around and then I saw that what was on me and then I cleared that off.
It's now 12:35 p.m., 17 minutes after the blast. Even though he was just 150 feet from ground zero, engineer Alan Reese has escaped unscathed from his office on B2. Rescue teams are desperate for his expertise on the towers.
I'm trained. These large rolls of architectural blueprints back up onto West Street to a command center.
Police and fire officials pore over the blueprints to map out a systematic evacuation of the building. Most of the injured suffer from smoke inhalation. Others fare much worse. At the White House, President Bill Clinton's chief of staff, Thomas Mack McClarty, is in the Roosevelt Room working on the budget when a staffer from the National Security Council passes him a note telling him about the blast.
Your first thought is to relate, or it was for me, you know, kind of a personal concern for those that were working there, investing there. And I think secondly, you do naturally say, well, what happened? You know, was it a fire explosion of some type, or was it a bomb of some type? The first concern was to make sure the president was notified of this, and indeed he had been.
At the World Trade Center, investigators have to wonder if there are other bombs set to explode. In the smoke and darkness of the garage, Tim Lang barely makes out an exit sign.
When I got to the exit sign, what I saw instead was a stairwell just completely covered in rubble. Huge concrete blocks, and there was no escape from in that direction.
Alone in an elevator on the 67th floor, Carl Selinger crouches in the smoke and dark. He finds a pen and piece of paper in his shirt pocket and blindly scribbles what he fears may be his last words to his wife and children.
I love you very much. Do wonderful things in your life. Barbara, my wife, I've always loved you and showed you as much as I could. Debbie, my daughter, my beautiful girl, with wonderful bear hugs and kisses. Too good. Jeff, my son. What a terrific person. Stay well, make good decisions, help people. Doug, my boy. Discover secrets to cure lots of the world's problems. I'm so proud of my children. They're all so wonderful.
Up on the observation deck in the freezing snow and cold, Rosemarie Russo tries anything to keep her children calm, despite the chaos more than 100 floors below.
We were able to see fire engines red. I said, what color is that? That's red.
In an elevator stuck on the 58th floor, Gene Fasulo and the others are still trying to escape from the suffocating smoke. Desperate for fresh air, they force open the elevator doors, only to face a 2-inch plasterboard wall.
We looked at each other and said, well, let's start digging a hole through this wall.
On the concourse level, Thomas McHale has rescued the man hit by concrete. He now hobbles down to the basement levels to help rescuers in the garage.
And there was just screams coming from in there, horrific screams, and you didn't know where they were coming from because you didn't know what floor you were on.
On the B4 level, engineer Fred Furby sets out in search of his colleague, Richie Walsh. He is bruised and bleeding, but stops to help people along the way.
There were some construction guys that were screaming, and I got them up, and I walked them down past B staircase to the parking lot.
1 p.m., 42 minutes since the blast. Tens of thousands still trapped inside the World Trade Center. In the parking garage, Tim Lang struggles to hold on.
I crawled over the cinder blocks and I fell over a chair. And I fell on someone's arm, and it felt like a woman's arm. And now I began to panic. I was breathing very, very fast. My heart was racing. I was very, very frightened. I crawled up in a fetal position and began to pray. For some unexplained reason, the day before, I pulled a biblical saying out of a calendar that a friend had given to me that I never paid much attention to. I read it that day. I don't know why I ripped it out. I don't know why I took it with me. But the words kept ringing in my head. It was a phrase from Genesis. I am with you and will protect you wherever you go. I will be with you constantly until I have given you all I have promised.
Rescuers battled the debris to make their way to the injured.
There was cars dangling above our heads. We seen, broken concrete floors and just a huge gaping opening 4 to 5 stories deep in the middle of what was once the parking garage.
I still couldn't find my partner, and he was there. I could hear a lot of people screaming, yelling, but I just couldn't find him.
Now, I was surrounded by some twisted, all I could call it was a celebration of evil. The blackness, the heat, the lack of air, death, the screaming car alarms, it all combined to be some crazy symphony.
On the 66th floor, Friends of Kathleen Collins refuse to leave her. One of her co-workers lifts her in his arms while another grabs her wheelchair. They begin carrying her and her chair down the stairs.
We were on the steps, and then at a certain point, the police and emergency crew, firefighters and that, met up with us.
Running on adrenaline, Fred Furby stumbles across two more injured men in the basement levels.
I picked them up, and I carried them out, and then went up the stairs.
After hauling both men over his shoulder to safety, Furby then helps one of them to an ambulance. He rides with him to the emergency room, then returns to the Trade Center. On the B2 level in the garage, Tim Lang crawls to a car and lies in the dim glow of its headlights. Oozing blood from a deep gash on the back of his head, he is thinking that he will never be found.
And then after a long time that I had given up again, I looked up and I saw a boot.
The boot is illuminated by the beam of a flashlight. A fireman is standing right next to Lang as he lies on the ground.
I couldn't speak, but he was not 6 inches from me and he couldn't see me. So I reached out and just grabbed his boot. And I heard him behind his mask scream. I'm sure I scared the hell out of him. The next thing I know, I'm being lifted up by two fellows.
Tim Lang is saved. Rescue workers will rush him to a hospital in Brooklyn where doctors will treat him for minor injuries and will stitch up the gash on the back of his head. But hundreds more are still trapped throughout the extensive complex, where rescuers still don't know if another bomb is set to explode. Rescuers work desperately against time, and two survivors risk their lives to help them. It's now nearly 4 hours since an explosion rocked the foundation of New York's tallest buildings, the World Trade Center. Throughout Manhattan, the city deals with the effects of the blast. A bomb threat causes the evacuation of the Empire State Building, and security is heightened at all local airports. The National Guard is on full alert. Businesses close early, and the traffic in Lower Manhattan is gridlocked. At the Trade Center, people are risking their lives to rescue the trapped and injured from the smoky towers. 4:10 p.m. The engineer who designed the structure of the World Trade Center, Leslie Robertson, arrives on the scene.
There was smoke coming out of the building, both at the base of the building, but also at the top of the building.
The lower levels of the buildings have partially collapsed, but the rest of the towers hold. 870 miles away in Atlanta, ATF explosives officer Joe Hanlon has just finished up an assignment when he gets an urgent call from his SAC, his special agent in charge.
My SAC called and said for me not to unpack, that I was going to New York City on a national response team call out.
At the World Trade Center, the bomb squad sweeps through the mammoth complex, looking for other explosives.
A lot of injuries, a lot of damage, more damage than I've ever seen before anywhere.
Rescue efforts are in full swing as others try to save themselves. In an elevator on the 58th floor, Gene Fasulo and his 9 fellow passengers are desperately trying to dig through the wall of the elevator shaft to safety using nail files and car keys.
The smoke was getting more dense, and we were again confronted with how do we continue this construction project because we couldn't see anything. One of the engineers on the elevator recalled that we carried beepers. If you push a button, it will light up, and with that little bit of light, we were able to continue this.
After 4.5 hours, they finally break through, digging a hole just wide enough to squeeze out of the elevator.
Ended up into a ladies' room on the 58th floor. And the very first step I took out of the elevator, kind of funny, was onto a toilet bowl.
Fasulo and his colleagues walk the 58 floors down to the lobby. The others leave, but Gene refuses. He stays in the smoke-filled building to help emergency crews. After saving 2 men from the rubble, engineer Fred Furby has returned to the towers. Still in search of his co-worker, Richie Walsh, Furby plunges back into the building.
I found other people, but I just couldn't find my partner, you know, and it was like I really started to panic, and I started crying because I sent him upstairs. When I heard the fire department saved them, they found them. They were in the elevator pit.
Richie Walsh is safe, but Fred Furby will not leave.
There was water going into areas where they needed the water to stop, and they needed the steam to stop, and so we were shutting everything, trying to save what was in the system.
On the concourse level, off-duty detective Thomas McHale also continues to help, despite suffering from a twisted ankle and smoke inhalation.
I'm hurting, I'm coughing up. I had a black stain around my mouth that didn't go away for days.
Kindergarten teacher Rosemary Russo and her students have now spent almost 3 hours outside on the roof of Tower 2 in the sub-freezing cold. They spend another 2 hours waiting inside near the staircase as firefighters radio for help. The plan is to bring them to a makeshift triage unit on the 94th floor.
The firefighter said, okay, this is the staircase. Intermittently, you're going to come across other firefighters in the stairwells, and they will be there leading you.
More than 90 floors below, Officer Thomas McHale is exhausted and hurting. He is about to leave when he hears the call from the firefighters trying to bring down the kindergartners.
Myself and the guys that I was with ascended the stairs to the 94th floor, finding different people with different ailments on our way up. And eventually we made it to the school children.
By now, the children have made it to the triage unit on the 94th floor.
They ushered us into an area, and they gave us, how nice they are, they gave us cookies and milk for the children.
Detective McHale stays behind as the firemen help the 14 children make their way down through the darkness of Tower 2's stairwell, a full 94 floors down.
They put a person with a flashlight to illuminate the stairs to bring the kids down. You know, it took a couple of hours.
As night falls, the injured McHale still cannot bring himself to leave. He stays on the roof to help with air rescues. Port Authority manager Carl Sellinger has now been all alone in a smoky elevator on the 67th floor for 5.5 hours. Finally, firefighters pry open the doors and he is rescued.
When they finally fished me out, I just felt myself going into like a shock, like a numbness.
6 p.m. Less than 6 hours after the blast. As more and more people are brought out to safety, authorities concentrate on the explosion itself. Stephen Dodge and others conclude that this disaster was no accident.
Whatever we had here was something more than some kind of mechanical disaster.
I was furious that there were people who would actually set out to destroy that which had taken years of my life to create.
The news that the disaster appears man-made reaches President Clinton.
First concern the President expressed was the same as mine, was the human element. It did occur to me, it was this the first strike, so to speak, if it were a terrorist act. We had, to my memory, had never really experienced anything like this on American soil.
Late evening. FBI and explosives experts have spent about 10 hours combing through both towers for other bombs. They find none. But the bomb has achieved its purpose. 5 people are now confirmed dead from the blast, more than 1,000 others injured. So now, amidst the rubble, law enforcement agencies are in a new race against time to find the people who did this. What they need is to uncover some clue that will unravel this devastating act of terrorism. Crews have been working all night to secure the structure of the World Trade Center after a catastrophic explosion killed 5 people and injured more than 1,000 the day before. As the day wears on, no confirmation is given to reporters about the cause of the blast, but officials do not hide their strong suspicions.
We'll give you a certain conclusion when we can prove it. Looks like a bomb, it smells like a bomb, it's probably a bomb.
The problem is, as the investigation drags into a second night, the bombers have now had more than 36 hours to make their getaway. Approximately 46 hours after the blast, law enforcement, including the FBI, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, and the New York Police, are all working intensely to find anything that will lead them to the bombers. A group of investigators is assigned to work inside the crater created by the bomb. NYPD Detective Donald Sadawi and ATF Agent Joe Hanlon are assigned to the same team.
It was a survey mission. We also had the mission to attempt to take swabbings that could be taken back to the laboratory later that day and examined to possibly get a lead on the type of explosive that was used.
One thing I noticed almost by chance was while I was talking with Joe Hanlon, that there was the gears from the rear end of a vehicle.
I realized that it had come from a vehicle that was either very close to the bomb that went off, or was in fact the vehicle that was carrying the bomb.
We walked along this broken slab that was leaning into the crater, and Joe and I spotted some debris that was buried in some rubble.
The two men find a 45-pound chunk of twisted metal, a piece of chassis frame about 5 feet long.
I've never seen this type of metal physical damage to the chassis of a vehicle, and that's when I started to assess that this possibly could have came from the vehicle that carried the bomb.
I noticed that there were some numbers on it that really didn't mean anything to me, but Officer Sadawi thought that it may be a VIN number.
Every car or truck has a unique VIN, or vehicle identification number. The number is permanently stamped into the metal of all vehicles in two ways, one that's legible and one that's encrypted in a series of raised dots.
I was just about positive that we had something real substantial here, and Joe and I were like really ecstatic about this, and you know, we both said, we got to take this out of here.
But they both know that to get this evidence out of the crater, they will have to break a cardinal rule of law enforcement. Never tamper with anything at the scene of a crime. On the other hand, leaving the evidence might delay a major break in the case.
There was some healthy discussion as to whether we should remove it at all. The fact that the area was shifting, the fact that we could have lost the material, prompted us to go upstairs and attempt to come up with a method as to how we could remove it.
The two officers make a critical decision on their own. Using a gurney, they bring up the piece of twisted metal. An ATF agent makes a tracing of the dotted code before the metal is sent to the lab for analysis.
When we informed our counterparts that we had removed some material, they weren't pleased, let's just say.
I saw this FBI supervisor who saw me at a distance. Well, he was livid. I think from the point he recognized it was me across the lobby, he never stopped yelling and screaming at me.
All the officers could hope for was that their hunch would somehow pay off. As Sunday stretches into Monday and on into Tuesday, there are no other leads to the bombers. It's now a full 5 days since the blast. The trains at the World Trade Center are up and running, but still no real trace of the terrorists. FBI Special Agent Jamie Cedeno, an auto crimes expert, is called in and takes a look at the rubbing made of the encrypted dots found by Sadawi and Hanlon.
When I looked at it, I knew immediately that we had a confidential VIN derivative sitting right there on that piece of paper.
Cedeno immediately runs the number through the National Insurance Crime Bureau database. The NICB keeps a record of all cars manufactured and documents if someone has reported a vehicle stolen.
Next thing you know, we've got registration information on a Ford van reported stolen at Jersey City PD on February 26th. I said, this is it.
The FBI then traces the van's registration to a rider rental agency in New Jersey. The van was the same vehicle rented and reported stolen by Mohammed Salame. The next day, Salame arrives at the rental office in New Jersey to pick up his $400 deposit on the van. When he arrives, an agent greets Salame from behind the desk. But he is not a rider agent. He's an undercover agent with the FBI. Dozens of other agents are hiding everywhere, on the rooftops, behind trees, and in unmarked vans. The building is surrounded.
There was a tremendous surveillance in place. There was a decision, a tactical decision made to apprehend him as soon as he came outside.
FBI agents arrest Salame as he leaves the Ryder office, 6 days after a bomb tore apart the World Trade Center. The hunch of agents Hanlon and Sadawi had been right on the money.
It was the most important piece of evidence at that point that occurred, and I think it accelerated the investigation to the point where an arrest was made.
I still was feeling kind of leery about this one FBI supervisor who threatened to throw me off the investigation team. I was in the back of the room. He called my name out, and everybody had kind of pushed me up toward the front of the room, and he publicly apologized in front of the other investigators.
So yeah, we high-fived there for a little bit, but then we went right back to the hole and began trying to piece together exactly what they had done.
March 15th, 1993. 17 days after the explosion, people working inside the center of the crater discover one more person buried deep beneath the rubble. The death toll from the bombing is now 6. Investigators are determined more than ever to find Salame's accomplices. Less than a month after the bombing of the World Trade Center in New York, 4 Islamic terrorists have been arrested. Mohammed Salame, the man who'd rented the van and driven the getaway car, Nidal Ayad, Ahmad Ajah, and Mahmoud Abu Halima. All 4 alleged conspirators are charged with the destruction of buildings by means of explosives causing death. The charges carry up to life sentences. Assistant U.S. Attorney Gil Childers is tapped to handle the assignment.
I certainly did not want to become known as the leader of a prosecution team that let the World Trade Center and bombers walk.
In just 7 months, Childers and his team put together a strong case and go to trial in September 1993. The trial goes on for 6 months, with 208 witnesses.
Every one of those witnesses told a little piece of the puzzle to the jury, and each one of those pieces was very important.
A year to the day after the first arrest and the bombing, the jury reaches its verdict. All 4 defendants guilty on all counts. Judge Kevin Duffy sentences each bomber to a 240-year prison term. In 1995, 2 more terrorists are arrested. Ramzi Youssef and Iyad Ismail, the 2 men who had originally driven the Ryder truck. In 1997, they are also found guilty of conspiring to blow up the World Trade Center. Each is sentenced to life in prison. The bombers were all followers of Sheikh Omar Abdel Rahman, a spiritual leader of a fundamentalist Muslim group based in New Jersey. The Sheikh, who has been linked to Osama bin Laden, was convicted in a separate case for sedition and sentenced to life in prison in 1996. Port Authority employees worked around the clock to repair the buildings. It was an extraordinary team effort. Within a month of the bombing, their hard work paid off. Businesses moved back into the Trade Center, and people tried to resume a sense of normalcy.
They don't teach you in college anything about dealing with losing your employees. The sound, the events are sort of seared into your memory cells.
On May 25, 1995, a memorial was dedicated on the Trade Center Plaza commemorating the 6 people killed in the explosion, including 4 Port Authority employees.
You realize that these terrible events can happen to anybody, you know, cause you to reflect that we're all mortal, you know. Makes you not take things for granted so much, little things.
For survivors, the effects of the bombing linger.
You certainly appreciate everything more. You appreciate your children more. You appreciate life more. You realize that we all have a limited amount of time.
There are circumstances and things that will happen in life, and everybody has a finite amount of time on the planet. So my feeling is you just live every day.
It's made me more aware of things, to always keep an eye open for things around me.
It took Port Authority Detective Tom McHale 2 years to recover. He lost partial hearing in his left ear and developed asthma as a result of the blast.
But the personality change, the roller coaster of emotions, the nightmares, the self-pity, the expression which I can never figure out is you felt guilty. I mean, how could you, it's not your fault how you feel guilty, but you do. You feel guilty for surviving.
Others, like building engineer Fred Furby, regarded as a hero for saving more than 20 people, say they felt deeply humbled by the tragedy.
Don't lose sight of reality, and remember that it could be you next time and somebody pulls you out.
Car alarms will always remind Tim Lang of February 26, 1993. He still avoids underground garages and the Twin Towers.
The good side of it is that things that used to bother me just don't bother me anymore. You know, my priorities were rearranged that day. The bad part of the experience is that a lot of things that we all take for granted, I can't anymore. We sit in this room and we assume we're safe, that the floor will not fall out from under us. I know otherwise. It can.